Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Damme and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies, and today I want to tell you about the new Netflix original horror movie, ELI. So if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know I generally do not do negative reviews, and that's because I only really talk about movies that I recommend that you watch. Now, this is not going to be a negative review. It's not going to be an overly positive one either. Now, that does not mean anything's wrong with ELI. It's just not the type of horror movie that I generally like, but I'm going to stay fairly objective with this review. Now, ELI revolves around a young boy who suffers from an autoimmune disorder and is taken to a specialty hospital, like a private hospital in this creepy old house that has been retrofitted to eliminate all, toxins and contaminants. And he's there to undergo a special medical procedure, and that's the setup. That's basically what you need to know. And what you ultimately get with this movie is a haunted house movie, which I like. However, ELI does rely on a lot of things that I generally do not like in horror movies, or at least I don't like when they rely on those things too much, and that's jump scares, overly creepy imagery, which may sound a little odd, I'll explain, and medical horror, none of which are really my favorites, especially when they're kind of the crux of the scares in the movie. And what I mean by creepy imagery, obviously we love creepy imagery, but weird little girls that contort their bodies and stuff, things like that, we've seen it. And with horror being such a crowded field, ELI starts off at a deficit for me, but I ultimately warmed up to it. Now, you spend a lot of time with ELI, the main character, roaming the halls of this dark manor with all sorts of creepy stuff happening. So if you like the creepy stuff and the kid walking around with the flashlight, seeing figures and jump scares and all of that, ELI is like filled to the brim with those things, and they're not necessarily cheap either. They're just not as creative as the scares that I would like to be. With so many great horror movies coming out now, ELI just feels a little bit dated and feels very formulaic. Again, not a bad thing, especially if you like all of those elements that I'm talking about, because ELI does deliver with those. It became a little tedious and a little tiresome for me up until the finale. Now, I'm not going to give away any spoilers or anything like that, but if you're enjoying the ride of ELI all the way through, I personally felt like the final act was by far the best part of the movie, which is not always the case, especially with horror movies. I was surprised at the direction that it went and thought it ultimately ended up making up for some of the shortcomings it had early on. And also, just the basic setup that I already explained really facilitates some of the more basic stuff I'm talking about, like the jump scares and the just wandering around the hospital. It's a decent setup to let you sort of wander around this creepy house for a while without it feeling like overly forced or anything. And like I said, if you like horror movies like that, ELI's a pretty decent one, especially for a new release that got released just in time for Halloween. I recommend it in that sense. If I'm turning you off in the way I'm talking about it, probably skip ELI. If you don't have any problems with any of the shortcomings I've talked about, this is going to be a good Halloween watch for you, I think. I also mentioned the medical horror aspect. ELI is decent in that respect as well, but that's mainly because the medical horror subgenre is just loaded with a bunch of crap. And ELI ultimately for me is somewhat mediocre. So for a comparison, another Netflix original that came out recently, In the Tall Grass, to me felt different and unique. It was a little bit more of a mind bender, whereas ELI is a little bit more formulaic and kind of straight down the middle. I will say I think parents, not all parents, but some parents are going to have a little bit of trouble with this one, because you do see a child go through some really intense medical procedures. I'm never really a fan of bad things happening to particularly young kids when it's for entertainment purposes in a movie like this. If it's a more serious movie about something maybe real, then it's okay if there's a message or lesson or anything like that. This is just a horror movie, and you do see a kid subjected to some pretty nasty stuff, ultimately for the sake of entertainment. Again, I'm not necessarily hating on this movie, certainly not one of my favorites. I don't know that it would make it onto one of my lists that I normally put out. It's not that bad either. If you like this review and you like the movie, let me know in the comments below. Also, thank the Patreon supporters. Here are their names. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, go check out the link in the description, see if it's for you. I do give Patreon supporters additional movie recommendations that you cannot find here on the channel. So if you're interested in anything like that, check it out. But I will keep making reviews like this one as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking this one out, and you will see me on the next one.